Hey, welcome to Faith Vocals. My name is Faith. I am a Christian who streams games, and for the past couple weeks I've been experimenting with having a talking segment ahead of the game, and then getting into the game when I'm done talking. So, as far as I can tell, that is working well for me, and that's what I plan to do today. Except, I've got a lot to talk about today. So, usually my stream runs for about 2 hours. I may go longer depending on how long it takes for me to talk. Depending on whether or not I have energy at the end of the stream, I may or may not get into a game. If I do any gameplay today, I plan to make that Subnautica. Not the new one, not the Below Zero version. I do plan to be playing the original Subnautica. So that is if I'm able to have the time and the energy to do that today. There's something that's really important to me that I'd like to address for the majority of the stream. If we don't get to gameplay today, then next week we'll probably certainly be getting into Subnautica gameplay. So what I've been doing the past couple weeks as I've been experimenting with this talking head format here is I've been going through the beginning of the Bible. I figure if I've got no specific topic that I want to talk about, then I'm going to kind of work my way through the Bible maybe. Just because the goal that I have for this stream, the goal that I want for this channel, I'm a Christian, clearly, looking at the Bible and talking about how that influences my beliefs, what my beliefs about that are, and how those beliefs influence me interacting with the world around me. And part of what I like to do is talk about the stories that get told in the games or the movies or whatever. Haven't actually been doing a lot of that. Mostly it's been about the Bible, as I have a larger community growing around this channel, hopefully, if Lord blesses. Then it would be great to find out what parts of the culture you guys enjoy and be able to talk about those things with you, and then how I as a Christian respond to our culture. But until that point comes, I've been mostly going through the Bible so that we can kind of get a foundation for where us Christians are coming from with our beliefs, what is at the bottom of our responses to culture. Because sometimes I think a lot of people in the world, they enjoy something, they enjoy a particular movie or a game or something, and maybe they tell a friend who happens to be Christian, and all of a sudden the Christian responds, "Oh, that's terrible," and you don't know why the Christian is responding and reacting in such a way. So I think it would be good to kind of create this sense of familiarity. Of course, I'm coming from a Christian perspective, but I would love to hear your perspective too. I want to hear from other people of other beliefs. I want to get to know what causes you to respond to the world the way you do, and how you respond, how you feel about the things that are going on in the world, how you respond to Christian beliefs. And I realize that when we get into subjects like religion and politics, then things can get dicey, things can get testy. And so what I want to try to encourage is for us to recognize that people hold different beliefs than we do. Me coming from a Christian perspective, I've got to realize there's a whole world out there of people who are not Christians and are not invested in Christian things and are actually invested in not being Christian. That's common, and certainly that's your prerogative. And I hope that you'll understand that me as a Christian, I'm invested in my Christianity. Part of that Christianity, part of being a Christian, we are encouraged to tell other people about our beliefs and encourage other people to consider them. We believe that Christianity holds the key to all of the ills in the world, really. That all of the everything that is wrong with the world stems from human rebellion against God. We are, as a race, as a species, as a kind, are not under God's blessing. We're in rebellion against Him, and God made a way for us to be saved from the punishment justly due to the people who rebel against the sovereign and standard of morality. but we don't have to suffer that punishment because God the Son, Jesus, came to earth as a human being, lived a perfect, sinless life. He was the only human who never rebelled against God. And yet he took on the punishment for our sin. He took on death, and he took on a criminal's death, even though he had never done anything wrong. And that meant that he stepped up to take our punishment for our sin, and he rose from the dead, which indicates that God the Father accepted that sacrifice from God the Son. And I believe Jesus was the only person who could do that. There's no human who could be so perfect as to take that punishment, because not only has no human being ever been perfect besides Jesus, but also us human beings are finite creatures who have committed a crime against an infinite God, which makes it an infinite crime. And so in order to pay for that crime, we need to pay an infinite payment. But us finite creatures are not capable of that. And that is why the infinite God stepped in, God the Son, to pay that price for us, because only he could heft that infinite burden and pay that price for us so that we can go to heaven and have peace with the infinite God for eternity. So that is the core of Christian beliefs. I do find that it's important to make sure that people know about that, because as a Christian, I believe that I am doing you a moral disservice if I do not at least help you to understand the danger inherent in existing as a human being, and the way to escape from that. The ramifications are eternal. Again, it's an infinite crime that each of us commits when we do something that is in opposition to God, who is the standard of morality. And so there is, the Bible says that there is eternal punishment for those souls who rebel against God. And so I want to help you understand, as a Christian, I think there's, it would be among the most, the most grievous disservices I could do to you, not to inform you about that danger and about how to escape from it. So I recognize that a lot of people are going to say, yeah, but I don't believe all the things you do, so I can't just accept what you're telling me. I can't just become a Christian. I have to deal with all of the things that all of the objections I have to Christianity, or maybe I don't have an objection. Maybe I just don't care about Christianity. You're telling me a nice fairy tale. And so I do believe that, although I would encourage you to consider it, to become a Christian, I recognize that we each have the responsibility and the freedom to make our own decisions. And so part of what I want to do on this channel, beyond bringing up my beliefs, is to encourage a discussion of what everyone else's beliefs are, mine and everybody else's, and how these beliefs interact with one another, and how do we get to a point where we can have conversations with one another without being antagonistic to one another, and without insisting upon people changing their beliefs. Is there a way that we can work with each other in general to share this world that we do and to make it a better place, without becoming intolerant of one another? Intolerance is one of those words that often gets lobbed at Christians, because of course, morally, we should be telling other people about what we believe. And I think sometimes that people think just the fact that I tell you this is what I believe, and I believe that I would be morally wrong not to tell you. I think some people think that just the fact that I'm telling you is intolerance. That I don't see that to be the case. I think I'm doing morally right by you to tell you. And you can certainly tell me about your beliefs, and maybe they don't mesh with Christianity. Maybe I have an issue based on what I read in the Bible with the beliefs that you have. But certainly for me to hear your beliefs and to respect you as a person is tolerance. That's the whole idea behind tolerance, is we don't have to tolerate something that we fully agree with and embrace. We already fully agree with and embrace it. What we have to learn to tolerate is the things that we don't fully agree with, the things that we're opposed to, but can we exist in the same space with that thing or that person that we have issues with. So long intro. I still have to figure out how to cut that down. But the topic that I want to get into kind of comes at the tail end of what I've been reading so far. Last week we just finished the first chapter of Genesis. I'll go ahead and pull that on the screen here. This is one of my favorite Bible websites, probably my favorite Bible website, blueletterbible.org, or you can type in blb.org if you want to use this site to look up any of the Bible references that I'm mentioning. They've got many different versions of the Bible. I tend to like the King James Version, the English Standard Version, or the New American Standard Bible. But in general, when people are producing a Bible version, in general, we're trying to go back to the original Hebrew or Greek, what's called the manuscripts, so the writings by hand that we've been able to discover in archaeology. We don't have what are called the autographs, which are the actual original parchment that the apostle or the prophet wrote down on when God was inspiring them. But we do have manuscripts, which are copies that people have made by hand of those autographs. And so sometimes order of words changes, or the choice of word changes, especially in translation. It can be difficult, if not impossible, to find exactly the right word for a word that's trying to be translated. So that's why we've got the different versions. Some versions have one word order, or some versions have another word order. But what we're looking for is something that expresses the same truths that is in the original manuscripts. So if you see a version that changes the meaning of what's being said in that manuscript at all, generally if you see a version that tends to deviate from the other versions in any significant way, that's one that I want to be cautious about. But a lot of the versions, like the ESV, the KJV, the NASB, they tend to kind of unite on these subjects of doctrine, and so I would trust all of them. The King James Version especially has stood the test of time. That one, written in 1611, so the English is a little bit difficult for people who are used to mostly 21st century English, but I would tend to be looking for versions that agree with that one. This one, the English Standard Version, I think has a little bit of an easier English for modern readers. So at the end of last week, we kind of breezed past this section. It was at the end of what we were talking about. And I want to get into this because I think it's a good jumping off place for what I want to talk about. If you've seen the title that I have up for the stream right now, you know that I intend to be talking about the mark of the beast. And if you know much about the Bible, then you know that the mark of the beast is actually mentioned and described at the end of the Bible in the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation. So we're starting here in the first book of the Bible, and I hope by the end of the stream to get to the last book of the Bible. So you see why I've planned this to be a long stream, chock full of me talking. So let's get into this. Starting in Genesis 1:26, the first chapter of Genesis, and the 26th verse of that chapter. This is God creating the world as we know it, creating the heavens and the earth. This is the sixth day of creation, and God is working on the final piece that he added to creation, which was mankind. So it says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness." And God is speaking in plural here, by the way, because us Christians understand God to be a Trinity. That is a being like none that we have ever seen in our world. There are some people who say that that humans are kind of a Trinity like this: a body, a soul, and a spirit. And that's a picture that I'm willing to have in mind. I'm not sure how fully I embrace the idea that humans are a trinity with both a soul and a spirit. I'm still trying to figure out what all those terms mean. The difference between us humans and God is that our body, soul, and spirit all tend to be in one place unless we die. And then we Christians believe that our physical side is what gets buried here on the earth and will eventually be raised at the end of time when Jesus comes back. But our soul, anything about us that is not physical, is spiritual, then goes to heaven. And when our body is raised when Jesus returns, then it will be glorified, made better, and reunited with that soul and spirit. But the way the Bible describes the Trinity, it describes God as one entity. There's one God throughout the Bible, only one God, but there are three persons in this Trinity. And I think a good example of the Trinity is when Jesus was on the earth. Before he really began doing his ministry on earth, he had just turned 30. Usually when people in the Bible started their ministry, it was around the time they turned 30 years old. And he met his cousin John the Baptist. So John had been doing ministry, encouraging people to repent. And the way that they would signify that they were repenting of their sins was they would go through this ritual where you probably maybe heard of this from Christians. Once we become a Christian, we get baptized. There's a ceremony at the church where the pastor dunks us under water. There's like a tank, a baptistry in the back of the church. We get dunked under water and come up. And that is a representation to us. It's an image of being buried with Christ and rising again. But they were doing this even before Jesus had died on the cross, and before Jesus was born. John the Baptist was there doing this ceremony, and it comes from a Jewish practice of washing and purification. And so Jesus went to John the Baptist to be baptized to signify that he was dedicated to righteousness, and actually Jesus is the embodiment of righteousness, the only righteousness that a Christian can claim to have, because we are humans too. We rebel against God too. And unfortunately, that doesn't change once we become Christians. That is something that we continue to struggle with. But Jesus is our only claim to righteousness. All the righteousness we have, we are receiving as a gift from him who did no sin while he was on the earth as a human, or ever. Let's see. I get on these tangents and then I got to figure out how they connect back. So I do apologize. That is something I have not learned to work around just yet. So let us make man in our image, in the image of God. God is talking in the plural, representing the Trinity. And I was going to talk about Jesus being baptized. He went to John the Baptist. He got baptized. And the Bible says that as Jesus came up from the water, a voice spoke from heaven saying, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." So there's a father-son relationship between this voice and Jesus, who has just come out of the water. And the Bible tells us that John the Baptist saw the Spirit like a dove descending on Jesus. So I don't know what that looks like. Apparently dove-like. I don't know exactly what the imagery there was, or how John perceived that. So, but you have this voice from heaven that's basically declaring itself to be Jesus' Father, that Jesus' Heavenly Father. Jesus did not have a physical father in the sense that we understand, because Jesus was virgin born. So he had an adopted physical father, that was Joseph. But his actual father is God the Father, who was speaking, saying, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." And then the Spirit appeared to John and settled on Jesus. So the Spirit is also a separate person from Jesus. Was not there before the baptism, appeared, settled on Jesus after the baptism, indicating that God had given Jesus a particular mission here on earth, which was to deliver us from our sins. So that is, I think, a good image of the Trinity. They are all one God. However, they are three distinct persons. And again, I can see that image, I still don't fully understand all the connections. So I believe this is a different kind of being than any that exists on Earth. This is a being that transcends anything that we are familiar with. So that imagery is the best way I have to explain it, but I don't believe I can fully explain the Trinity. But we see again here in this passage, and I'm looking up at my second monitor. Yeah, so you understand that. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness." So God speaking to the other members of the Trinity. They're all united in purpose. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. And so I explained before last week, this means that every human being made in the image of God, it has a purpose to represent God. Everything we do reflects on who God is. And of course, in us being opposed to God, we certainly are not perfect in our reflection of God. We're like broken mirrors. But there are still some things we do that are beneficial. You look at the charity work that goes on around the world is a great example of that. Random acts of kindness, things that people do in general, the way families care for one another. We are not 100% evil. And in this passage, when God was creating humanity, we were not at all evil. God made us perfect. However, he did give us free will, and when I eventually get to Genesis 3, which I don't plan to do today, then we see where evil was introduced into the nature of humanity. So us humans have this dichotomous relationship within ourselves. We have a side that is made in God's image that reflects who God is and demonstrates what God embraces. But then there is another side that is opposed to God and is in rebellion against God, and every single human being has that side too. And so that's what all the religions and worldviews of the earth have got to grapple with, is how is it that humanity has both of these sides in them. And that's what the Bible does here in part, is it says, well, God made man in his image, so man is created good. And then there is, in Genesis 3, there is the explanation for why we're all innately evil as well. Let us make man in our image after our likeness. So that's one important point I want us to kind of hold on to as I continue talking. Man is made in God's image. That gives mankind, every individual in mankind, innate value. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So when God created humanity, he also created us with this responsibility. We are the stewards of the world. And I do believe that we generally feel this responsibility. I know there's a huge discussion these days about ecology, about climate change, and whether or not humanity is responsible for the climate change. What, if any, impact we have on the climate is. I am not a scientist and certainly not an expert. I don't think I'm in a position to say dogmatically whether we do or don't have an impact on the climate and on ecology. I do believe that we do have a responsibility to treat our world responsibly, that we are not to abuse the planet that God has given us. We're stewards. We are taking care of the planet for God and want to leave it in a better state than we received it. On the other hand, the planet is subjected to us and we are subjected to God. So our responsibility to take over the planet, one should never, most certainly, number one, should never supersede our responsibility to be submitted to God. We should never be worshiping the planet over God. As far as my Christian beliefs, go based on what I'm saying here. The other thing is, I don't believe that we should be so focused on the earth that we are harming humanity. Again, mankind made in the image of God. So nature is subjected to God, and it is subjected to God's image. God put man in dominion over the earth. So we are responsible to take care of it. We don't want to trash it. We are expressing our worship of God by respecting the gift that he has given us. On the other hand, nature is not our God. Should never be our God. The God who created nature should be our God. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them, and God blessed them. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it." So this is the third point I want to make. I didn't quite delineate the second point first. We're made in the image of God. That gives us innate value. Second, we are given dominion over nature, which gives us a responsibility to take good care of it, even as we are submitted to God and it is submitted to us. And third, God said, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it." So it says this is a blessing. God blessed them. So God is encouraging Adam and Eve, at least the first two humans, to expand in number. As far as I know in the Bible, God never rescinds this blessing. God never says, okay, from now on you are blessed if you do not expand. From now on you are blessed if you diminish in population. As far as I know, this blessing still stands. If you are expanding in population, then it is a sign of God's blessing. And I'll tell you, it is a bit of a concern to me as I look at our world, and I'll get into this in a bit more depth going on, or maybe this would be a good point to get into it. Let me just make sure. Three things I want us to keep in mind here. One, man made in God's image has innate value. Two, man is in dominion over nature, is a steward of nature under God. And three, God has blessed humanity and said, be fruitful and multiply. So I've got myself some notes here. This is the first one. I want to just make sure that I'm on track, because I get rambly, I wander off, and I know this is going to be a long process. So I want to make sure that I'm as on track as possible. So I think the next point that I want to make is our society, since the point that Adam and Eve existed, we had two human beings on the earth originally. God created Adam first, and then in Genesis 2, it describes when God created Eve. So there were initially two people on the earth. And since then, humanity has expanded over the millennia to what I now understand to be about 7.8 billion people on the earth. And that's quite a lot of expansion. I've seen some charts, kind of like a hockey stick graph. It has a flat line going like until about the 1800s, pretty flat, some growth, but pretty flat. And then suddenly towards the 1900s, 2000, it goes straight up. Our population has just skyrocketed in the past couple centuries, past century or two. And so now I'm hearing, now we're hearing a lot more talk about, ever since the Industrial Revolution, we've got the possibility of overpopulation. We've got the possibility of mankind consuming too many resources because our population has just exploded. And let me go ahead and bring up this image that this is a monument that exists in Georgia. From what I understand, this was erected in 1979 The person who established it, we don't know his name. We know his pseudonym. So he chose the pseudonym R.C. Christian. I think it's interesting that he chose the word Christian to be part of this pseudonym. He was. I've got some of the history off of Wikipedia about this structure. It's in Georgia in the United States. In June 1979, R.C. Christian approached the Alberton Granite Finishing Company on behalf of a small group of loyal Americans and commissioned the structure. When arranging payment, Christian said that he represented a group which had been planning the guidestones for 20 years and which wanted to remain anonymous. So I think that is the part that I want to emphasize here. There we go. As we're looking at this structure. So it wasn't just this man alone who was commissioning this. He had a unspecified number of people who were supporting this project with him, this group that was funding this project. And from what let me go back here. I suppose this is the contractor. He assumed that Christian was a nut and attempted to discourage him by providing a quote which was several times higher than any project the company had previously taken, explaining that the guidestones would require additional tools and consultants. So he was trying not to do the job, but because Christian had this, I hate to use the pseudonym for him because it reflects my religious group, but he does not reflect our religious beliefs, as I'll point out here. But the contractor apparently tried to discourage him by padding the pricing, but this person was so committed to doing to having the monument, to the principles that are placed on the monument, that he and his organization, his group, were willing to foot the bill. So you can see here there's several languages on the monument. We're seeing English, some cuneiform, I guess, on the top, some Russian. I understand there's Swahili on here, think Latin. So if you go to Wikipedia and look up the Georgia Guidestones, those tabs are not visible here. So Wikipedia, Georgia Guidestones is where you can find more about this monument. You see it has not been well received by certain people, unfortunately, using Jesus' name in order to justify the graffiti. I do not agree with this. I definitely look at the stones and I say I'm not in favor. The hackles on the back of my neck do rise up when I see what was engraved on these stones, but I don't think it's justification for harming property. This does no good. If anything, it just further demeans the name of Christ and the name of Christianity. So, but people are identifying a religious issue with these stones. How do I get back to Wikipedia here? There we go. Okay. So, looking at the stones themselves, here's the part in English. It's like 10 Commandments, but not the biblical 10 Commandments. These are 10 Commandments that, what's the description here? Guidestones to an age of reason. So 10 Commandments for an age of reason is what these are being promoted for. And the very first commandment, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. So to me, that sounds like they're saying we ought to have no more than 500 million people on the planet. That is the ideal number. I don't know how they come up with that number, what their rationale is for that number. So last I checked, our current population, I believe I mentioned this, is 7.8 billion. So I'll revisit this. How do they plan to get, and I don't know the people involved in this, but I'm been looking at other things that related to this. So I'll get into that. How would we bring the population down to 500 million? So some of the other principles they have: guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. So to me, this seems like a highly evolutionary model of it seems like promoting it, like playing God from a evolutionary framework. So they want to guide reproduction, limit the direction of reproduction, control who is being reproduced, improving fitness and diversity. So that word diversity is the thing that keeps them from being Nazi, I'll say. We understand there was a group of people who was interested in guiding reproduction in a non-diverse way. I still don't agree with guiding reproduction, improving fitness and diversity. Again, it's playing God. I have nothing against diversity. I have nothing against fitness. I do have something against guiding reproduction. Every human life is valuable. So this does not make me feel good. The hackles on the back of my neck stand up. Unite humanity with a living new language. I do not understand that phrase at all. I'm concerned because I see a lot of our terminology now being changed in a way that I don't understand. So words and terms used to label people that I don't believe are representative of those people. I'm not going to get into all the different words and terminologies now because I'm sure that would be basis for argument, possibly, and I don't want to dive into that subject now. I'm sure that such words and terms will come up in the future. They have come up in the past on this stream. Rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. So I don't 100% disagree. I don't 100% agree. This is one of those things with tempered reason. What is their basis for understanding tempered reason? They're describing a value judgment here. We're looking for tempered reason. How do we know when we're reasonable? And how do we know when we're tempered? Is there a time when our reason should not be tempered because it is right? Because we absolutely do have the truth? Or should reason submit to being tempered? Should there be a time when our reason is less important than being tempered? And then on top of that, I believe there are good reasons to be a Christian. Other people believe there are good reasons not to be a Christian. So what is the standard for reason? This is a buzzword, I'd like to say. It feels meaningful, but it's a word that I would like to see defined. Rule passion, so I suppose that's the emotions. Faith. I suppose they're talking about religion. I believe faith is all-encompassing. I believe when you sit in a chair, you are exercising faith that chair will hold you up. Based on the evidence of all the other times that chair has held you up and the fact that objects with a similar structure tend to hold people up. But I do believe this word faith is being used in the context of religion. Tradition, so they're moving away from religion, and they're talking about tradition, and I'm wondering what their position about tradition is compared to tempered reason. I think a lot of the reasons the traditions we have are there because they have worked. The traditions we have today are the ones that have worked over time. So when they're saying we're going to rule tradition with tempered reason, does that mean we're going to cut out traditions that have worked over time because in the moment we've reasoned that they don't work anymore? Do we have the wisdom to do such a thing? I don't know. a lot of these rules, a lot of these commandments on this monolith seem to apply words that have multiple meanings to multiple people. So that is why I would take issue with what's on this rock. I mean, a lot of it sounds good. If I'm reading it from my own perspective, great. Let's do that. Let's not maintain humanity under 500 million because we've got more than that now. Let's let God govern, guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. Of course, the way to do that is to put it all under control of God. So, yeah, let's give that to God. God is going to guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity, or whatever God's values are for reproduction. I say that's great. Let's do that. Unite humanity with a living new language. I believe in Revelation there are passages about people singing a new song, about people receiving a name that only they know the meaning of, that only they understand. So the Bible talks about a new language or a new way of communicating at the end of time when things are the way that God has intended them to be. So yes, let's do that. Let us get to the millennial kingdom that God is going to establish and see what new language he has provided for us, which I'm sure will be a living new language because God is the God of the living and not the dead. Rule, passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. I do believe that God is the standard for reason. I believe that anything that does not align with God does not align with reason. So yes, rule, passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. I agree with that. Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. If they are aligned with God's morals and standards, then certainly they would be fair and just, yes. But you see how if you're not a Christian, if you do not align with the principles of the Bible, you would take possibly a great, you would find a great difference with what I am saying. If you are someone who is not submitted to the God of the Bible, then the last thing you probably want is for the God of the Bible to be the God that's judging your behavior. Because, again, as I've said, the standard of the God of the Bible is perfect, and none of us holds to that perfect standard. By the way, there's nothing in this line, at least, about mercy. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. And I think this sentence is probably the one for a lot of the graffiti that was shown here. I'll pull that picture up again. So one of the phrases that was graffitied on here says "Death to the New World Order," and there is an understanding in Christianity, and I probably will get into this a little bit today, that there is going to be a world government that is going to govern economy and religion, and it's going to be global. We won't have the distinction of nations the way that we do today, at least in the same way that we do today. Nations will yield their sovereignty to this world order. And so I can see why someone reading this would say, this is promoting the New World Order. And if they are a staunch Christian, I'm not sure about the religion they use the name of Jesus, so they're claiming Christianity, but I don't think this language is, I don't think this represents what God would call us to do. This seems like a very worldly approach to the issue, calling for death and harm. That does not seem to align with God's values to me. That is a person who maybe they come from a biblical background, but they're thinking like a non-biblical person. But I can see, looking at that, why that would cause such a response in someone who's not fully aligned with what the Bible teaches, or taking a portion of the Bible out of context to justify what they're doing, which I believe is not in line with God's values. So avoid petty laws and useless officials. Again, how do we define which laws are petty and which officials are useless? Again, sounds great. Who's going to be the judge of that? Balance personal rights with social duties. So this looks like the question of what is more important, the individual or the community. Age-old question. I think the only solution to that will be once Jesus is king and the standard of morality rules, then that's when we will get the perfect arbitration for that question. But until then, that's the age-old debate. Who's going to be the judge of that? Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. I think it's interesting that they bring up the word infinite here, and yet they are not referring to, say, God or deity. Again, this is a word that can easily be defined multiple ways. I could look at that word infinite and say, well, the only infinite thing is God. So seeking harmony with God, absolutely, I agree. But there are people who would say, well, the only infinite thing is the universe, which is not personal. So yeah, we should make sure that we don't get snuffed out by breathing our own trash in the universe or whatever, which I agree with that too. Let's try to avoid that. But again, this is one of those sayings that sounds good from your own perspective, but are you necessarily going to be the judge of this order that these people who establish this monolith are promoting? And finally, the last point they want to leave you with. Be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. They say it twice because they want to make sure you remember as you walk away, leave room for nature. So if you need to die, then die. That's the impression that I'm getting from that. Now, maybe it's not that dire. Maybe they're just saying, don't litter. That would be fair. But with the first point being maintain humanity under 500 million, again, how do they plan to do that? I don't think you can come to this monolith and walk away and say, okay, time to start harming people, time to start killing people. No. There are other ways that people are going about doing this, but people are going about doing this. So I want to go ahead and, because let me say, a group of people, we don't know which group of people, we don't know how large, they could be 2 people for all I know, 2 very wealthy people, but a group of people came together to have this structure built with these 10 commandments. Multiple people, I will say, be it 2 or be it thousands, decided these were important enough to establish, and they wanted to make sure that this structure could withstand cataclysms if necessary. They wanted this structure to last through time because they have such a firm belief that the world should have no more than 500 million people in it, and we should leave room for nature and everything in between. I'm going to go ahead and close the Wikipedia article here. Oh well. Okay. Back up there. Yeah, we can close this. And I'm going to get back to that passage for now. So, we've got at least evidence. The reason I bring that rock up, maybe you think, well, this is a very fringe group of people. They're probably not that big or important. That was probably the only thing they did in their lives, right? Was make money to build a monolith. Personally, I don't think that is necessarily credible. I think if they could establish the money to build that monolith, then they've also got other goals that they are putting into play. Again, this was only back in 1979. I was born in 1985, so those people could certainly be alive today and influencing society, or they could not. It could be that they never established that level of power. But I bring up that stone because it is a physical, empirical evidence that there are people who are looking to diminish the population of the world, in opposition to this verse that I've got up here on the screen, where God is encouraging us to multiply, be fruitful, and multiply in number. I've heard some things about Bill Gates. Does Bill Gates want to end people in order to bring down the population? I couldn't find any verification of that, but I could find verification that he does want to diminish the population as well. I don't know if he's related to this, but he's an example of someone who would like to diminish the population, because he also is concerned about ecology, and we only have enough resources to divide amongst enough people. And some of the resources that we're using, say for instance metals, are not really resources that we can get back. Maybe we could go to other planets and stuff and mine them out of other planets, but those are resources that are constantly being subtracted from the pool of availability, and they are not being added to at this point. They are not sustainable. You can grow a tree and then from its seeds grow more trees, but you can't at this point grow more of the minerals that we are looking for. Maybe with science you can make diamonds and things like that, but I think a lot of what we're using, eventually we're tending towards running out of those resources. So since we can't grow the resources, the argument goes, you've got to diminish the population that's using the resources, and then we'll have more resources to last longer, so that we don't die out so quickly as a group of, as an entity, as a species. Let me go ahead and say that from a Christian point of view, I believe God created the earth, and God knew how long the earth would last, so God gave us the resources necessary to keep us going until the time that God planned to renew the earth, which is what the Bible says God will do. At that time, God can certainly create more resources if we need them. Under God's kingdom, then God is going to establish a way of life that will appropriately manage those resources. So while I do want to be responsible with what we're given, I don't think we have to worry about the world ending because we ran out of resources. I think God has given us enough. Again, the verse here, be fruitful and multiply. I am not aware of anywhere that God has said, okay, that's done, stop multiplying. So I do not see a need for us to recede the population of the world. But there are people who do. There's the argument that the only way that we can keep the resources we have available for the future is to back down the population. I thought it was interesting. One of the ways that Bill Gates is working on this is through vaccines, and a lot of people say, "See, he's poisoning people with vaccines." I don't believe that. What he said, I've got this article from 2011, so long before COVID was an issue, long before the vaccines that are big news now. So this was a Forbes article from November 2nd of 2011, written by Matthew Herper. I'll let you look it up. For some reason on this page on this browser, this cover looks really squished. But this article talks about Bill Gates' involvement with vaccines, and what it explains is that rather than using vaccines as a weapon to diminish population. Oh, okay. Patrick, just saw your message. Welcome. Good to see you. Okay. Apparently it doesn't want me to stay on that page. I'll go ahead and move on to another page here. And Patrick, just so you know, if you're still listening, I'm not sure what the I see. Okay, that makes sense. So the plan for today, what I'm talking about is going to take a considerable length of time. So I may go over the usual time length that I do for streaming, And I may or may not be playing Subnautica depending on if I have the energy for it at the end of the stream. So we'll see how that goes. This may be an all talking stream rather than a game stream. If you want to hang out in case I play the game, in case you're interested in watching, then that's fine. Okay, good. So we're both on the same page. So I was talking about Bill Gates and vaccines. He wants to diminish he and a lot of other people want to diminish the population of the world so that we have more resources to last longer. And the article that I pulled up, one of the ways that he plans to do this is by making vaccines. And the argument goes, the way that he understands this to work, according to this Forbes article that I pulled up. Okay, great, Patrick. Good to have you. The way that this works as far as the article goes, let's say you are living in a third world country, and most of your work, say, is done by farming or whatever. You work hard in your rice paddies. You're trying to get the land to give you something to eat. You may be dealing with the weather conditions and the diseases, and life is hard in these third world countries where they don't have all of the advancements that we do in our country. They don't have all of the medical development that we do in our countries. We get vaccines, they do not. So let's say you're a farmer in this third world country, and you fall in love with someone of the opposite sex. So you guys get married, you guys work together on the farm to raise the food that you need to survive together, and then you suddenly are expecting a child. So, okay, this is going to be another mouth to feed. You've got to work hard and feed 3 mouths now in order to sustain yourselves. But eventually, this child grows a bit and has the means, has grown to the ability to help you on the farm. So now you've got an extra pair of hands to help you on the farm. That's good. And that makes you maybe more efficient about getting the food together. So that's good. And this child hopefully will grow up to be an adult to take care of you in your old age. So when you're no longer able to run the farm, they will be running the farm. They will continue to give you food. They will help you when you're sick. So this is good. This is positive. And then let's say that this child, just a few years old, just old enough to start doing chores on the farm, dies from illness. Okay, so now it's just you and your wife again. And you don't have anyone to take care of you in your old age. So you can see why it would be beneficial to a third world family who's got this scenario to have another child. But in case that child dies, maybe we better have another child. So this is our third child, the second one living. But things are hard enough. Maybe we had better have another child, just in case the first 2 don't make it. And so the understanding, as far as I know from the article I pulled up from Forbes, where Bill Gates is coming from regarding vaccines, is that a lot of the families over there in the third world countries have more children because they're accounting for, maybe my children won't last to take care of me. And so then, but if you give these families vaccines, then there are fewer diseases that can wipe out their children. And so the families won't have to have so many children in order to make sure that the next generation lives to take care of them. So that's the way that Bill Gates understands vaccines diminish human reproduction. So you're not over producing, and I hate to say that, because again, like this passage says, God says, be fruitful and multiply. I don't believe we can be overproducing. God's blessing us to be fruitful and multiply. He knows how many resources there are. And I believe that people are a resource too. There are great minds who have made our lives easier through the inventions that they've made and the discoveries that they've made. And it's a shame if we are missing out on some great minds because we are not reproducing as a human race. So, but again, if we want to get, and I turned off the image of that Georgia Guidestone, but if we want to get the population down to 500 million, like the people who established that monument in Georgia say, then are we going to go out and just end people right away? Most people would say no. Most people would say, well, maybe we can reduce the population. Maybe over the next generation or so, then we don't have to have so many people being born, and eventually it will go back down to 500 million and we'll be fine. And so vaccines, I think, are one way that that this is going on, and I have no issue with vaccines. If your idea of diminishing the population doesn't hinder children from being born who are already in the womb, I have no issue. I am pro-life, so I believe that, let me put it this way. I believe that the souls that exist today are more important than the souls that don't exist today and could exist. We're not trying to bring more souls in. Hello, Truth for Satan Ministries. Welcome back. So the souls that don't exist today are not under our control. That's under God's control. The souls that exist today, and I do believe that they exist starting from the moment of conception, we do have the responsibility to treat them made in God's image, like this verse says, let us make man in our image. That gives them value as human beings. And so I would prioritize taking care of each of them. So I take no issue with the idea that a vaccine is going to help people to make a certain set of decisions that they wouldn't before. That, again, like the article that I was talking about Bill Gates, the idea that the vaccine means that families will not be having as many children because they don't need to be afraid of as many dying. I don't see an issue with that. I would see an issue with other things that I see in society, such as birth control that has the potential to end a life that is conceived in the womb. I do think that is possible. Abortion. I think lifestyles where people are no longer interested in creating families for selfish reasons. People who are not fulfilling this purpose, being fruitful and multiplying in number. That is, I think we should be valuing this. We should be multiplying. We shouldn't be seeking to diminish as a population. So, Truth for Satan Ministries, you say, doesn't Genesis 1:27 say God is a hermaphrodite? Asking respectfully. I am, let me check. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. I'm not sure what all is involved in that word image. So how deeply that word image goes. The verse has an anomaly. It ends with male and female created he them. Yet Eve is only created later on. That is true. I do believe that much of Genesis 1 is in summary. And a couple weeks ago, I kind of mentioned this about Genesis 1 through 3. So I don't believe that this is a detailed representation of creation. Because, again, we have Genesis 2, which I think does go into a little detail regarding the sixth day of creation. So let's see. I've got a point that I am working toward today, so I'm going to continue on in that direction. Certainly, I am interested in asking and answering questions. I do have a point that I am working toward today. So if Adam was created as male and female, he was a hermaphrodite, and if he was created in God's image, I don't think that's the read that we should have on this earth. Male and female, he created them. So that implies more than one person. And again, I think this is summarizing the creation process, which takes place on, which gets addressed in some more detail in Genesis chapter 2. let me go ahead and deviate from my topic now, because there is a question that I do have in mind. I'm curious. Okay, so Patrick, I'm seeing your message now. Um, okay. Is that a meme? Is that what you're referring to? Um is that the context here? Is you're bringing up a picture that you saw? So, Truth for Satan Ministries, I'm kind of curious about your interest in the question about whether or not God would be a hermaphrodite. Um, I'm curious about what it is that motivates the question. Okay, great. Thank you, Patrick. So, I'd love to hear what it is that makes that question important to you to ask. Truth for Satan Ministries. And I think I'll go ahead and continue talking for a while, waiting for the answer to my question, but just so that we're filling in the dead air here. Um, so, in the first part of the verse, it says, "In the image of God, he created him," implying that only Adam was created at that time. Or yes, and let me go ahead and pull up the different version comparisons. And I know we've got a lot of versions here, so that raises some other questions. I'm going to go ahead and say I tend to look at the King James Version, the English Standard Version, and the NASB, the North American Standard Version. Personally, those are the ones that I know seem united. I tend to try to stay away from versions that don't seem to follow the tendencies of the majority of the versions of the Bible, and I recognize the versions that are here are because of the differences in translation. So we're trying to find what is as close as possible to the original texts that these were written from in Hebrew and Greek. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Man in his image created he him. That's New King James Version. That's not a bad one either. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created he him. So again, like you're saying, there's this section in the first part of the verse where it's speaking about a specific individual. And then it changes the wording in the second part of the verse. I think someone from the time period that the Bible was written, looking at this, understands why we're talking about two genders and now we're suddenly talking about two people. But again, I'm curious. There is further support for the interpretation because Eve was taken from his rib, at which point he became a single gender. Okay. So again, I'm curious, what is the importance of the question to you? What does it matter to you whether there is one answer versus another? Religion 101. This feels like it's a bit deeper than Religion 101. I don't know. Oh, okay. I guess what I'm asking about is, what does it change? in your understanding of things. I'm trying to determine whether God has a hermaphrodite nature or what the meaning of Genesis 1:27 is. Okay. What does it change in your opinion? Obviously, I have a clear opinion based on what I've learned from the Bible. Is this a significant point to you, or is it a point of curiosity that has no ultimate importance? So that's, again, trying to understand where you're coming from also as you're asking questions and as I'm doing my best to answer. If God is a hermaphrodite, that means God is neither male or female. And I feel like there's a second point about to be made here. I'm asking because most people assume that God is male, a father figure. What is your take on this? Well, as I look at the verse, I see, so God created man in his own image. Well, let me go ahead and continue. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. So if this word him is important in determining who Adam is, or whether God is creating Adam and Eve or just Adam, then I would say this word he is important in determining who God is, and whether God is male or female. Now, I do believe that human gender, human sex, was created at this moment when God created humanity. Certainly God had created animal gender, animal sex, with the creation of animals earlier in the day. And on the fifth day when he created the birds and the fish. So before day 5, I don't believe that physical sexuality existed because God is spirit. I don't understand spirit to be, to have a sexual component. Remember that we are dealing with Old English here, and that Eve is only created later on. I'm not familiar with the Old English. Originally, the language would have been Hebrew in this case. And in Hebrew, I think they do have gendered language. And I do believe that they would refer to, say, a mixed group using the male gender. So there is that factor to consider. But looking at how things are working, at least from the beginning of the chapter, Genesis 1, to this point, I don't believe that God would be defined innately by physical sex, because God is a spiritual entity. Now, as God has chosen to represent himself to us, he has represented himself through a book written in the Hebrew language, for one thing, using male pronouns. And so I do believe that God is taking on a father role. And again, I did mention when Jesus was baptized, he came up out of the water. The Hebrew Yahweh when reversed means she, he. I'm not sure what the relevance of reversing it is. So we tend to read words in a specific direction. I know the Hebrew people read from right to left. I would take that to be the way we should be reading the passage if we want the actual meaning of the passage. So I was talking earlier about Jesus being baptized. Jesus came out of the water, and a voice from heaven, which we assume to be the first part of the Trinity, God, said, "This is my Son, in whom I am well pleased." So we're certainly seeing Jesus physically represented as male. In every other reference in the Bible that I'm seeing in about God, I'm seeing a representation as male. Okay, Patrick, I'm seeing your question here. It doesn't seem to be sequitur. It doesn't seem to follow from the conversation. So I'm curious what your intent for that question is. I'm just going to leave that there. So as far as I can see from Scripture, I have no reason to believe that God is anything other than he seems to have allowed himself to be represented within the restrictions of the Hebrew language. Are you saying that God is male, a father figure? I'm saying that God has chosen to represent himself as the Father. Again, I don't believe that God is defined by physical gender. God defined the physical gender. So God made many creatures, male and female, including humanity, and he says humanity is made in his image. And relating to humanity, God chose to refer to himself as the Father. Jesus referred to God as the Father. So that is the way I understand God should be represented. So you said, thank you for, okay, thanks for explaining. I'm glad I could answer your question. I'll go ahead and back on the topic. So I was talking about how there is an agenda out there to diminish the population, and Patrick, God did create eggs, so I assume he likes them. I assume they are a positive factor in the world. That's what I'm going to say. So there is an agenda, I believe, in our society for ecological reasons to diminish the population of the earth, which is in opposition to the blessing that I think God has given us, with full knowledge and sovereignty of the way earth would trend. I don't understand God to have ever rescinded this blessing to be fruitful and multiply. So there is a societal impulse against. I'll just remove that tick mark. It's bothering me. There's a societal impulse against this this principle that God gave at the very outset of humanity. And I understand if people are coming from a non-theist evolutionary view, they don't believe that God is there to have full knowledge of the future of the planet, and God is not going to renew the planet at any point. So I understand why people would take the view that we need to depopulate the planet. How is that working? We look at attempts to diminish reproduction, and I think there's a lot out there. I don't know how many of them are a coordinated human attempt. I do believe there is a spiritual effort to... against humanity, against God's principles and values. I do believe that Satan, the adversary of God, is at work to destroy. Patrick, I see you asking questions. I'm not sure if they are involved in the discussion. So I did answer the question for Truth for Satan Ministries. I was trying to figure out why Truth for Satan Ministries was asking his question too, and I'm doing the same for you. I'm seeing a number of questions. Do these questions mean something to you? Or are you trying to get a response, or what is the meaning for the questions? Okay, so are people out to murder people to diminish the population? Not at this point. But there has been the message going out for a couple years now Can you give me an example of where Satan destroyed someone in the Bible? Not at this moment. Okay, Truth for Satan Ministries. We will get back to that when I get done with the topic, or possibly on a future. I think the scope of the answer to that question is too wide for me to stay on topic and address the question. But certainly in a future stream, I would be happy to have that discussion. Okay, Patrick. I'm going to be ignoring any questions that don't seem to be motivated by understanding what I'm talking about here. So just to let you know. There have been people in government, for instance, I'm thinking of, well, the name that's on the top of my head, the name that I'm thinking of is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She was behind the Green New Deal. And I think if I'm remembering properly, I think one of the motivations she had for establishing the Green New Deal was the idea that in 12 years from the time she was saying it, the Earth would be irreparably damaged ecologically. Okay, thank you. I think that Patrick is trolling. I'm not going to make suppositions. I'm just going to say I'm not going to feed that behavior anymore. So there are people out there who believe the world has less than 12 years before irreparable damage. And so let me ask you, and I'll just, this is a rhetorical question. You can answer if you want to, chat. But and let me go ahead and go full screen, by the way. If the world only has 12 years until irreparable damage, does it make sense that we just wait for repopulation to decrease? I think there are people out there, and again, this is not one of my beliefs. I'm just supposing about other people's beliefs. I think there are people out there who would be motivated to depopulate the planet, preferably within 12 years. How do you do that? It's going to take more than having people ceasing to have babies. Because, again, assuming the organization that established the Georgia Guidestones has any weight, assuming there are people who are aligned with that kind of thought process, people would look at the Georgia Guidestones and say, yes, we do want the world population to be down to 500 million. Then there is a significant decline that would need to happen. Would it need to happen within 12 years or less? I'm not going to speculate, but I think there is reason to think that people would be motivated in that direction. How would they do that? How would they decline the population down 7 billion people in a quick period of time? I'm not going to necessarily say 12 years, but in a rapid period of time. Let's see. Got my notes here, flipping through them really quick. So I've kind of mentioned the efforts to diminish repopulation. I see something else developing in our society, I think, where we've got this divide, at least in the West, and there have been divides have existed throughout history between races, certainly, political groups. I believe that the blueprint for the Georgia Guidestones originated in the Bible. This is just my personal opinion. I have given my opinion for why the Georgia Guidestones would not be in line with the Bible, so you're certainly welcome to look back and see what I said there. So I'm not going to dig too deep into that, as I'm on my way on another topic there. So I've looked at diminishing the reproduction, but I'm seeing in society in the West, we have certainly got a polarization has become a significant issue. And with the internet making what everyone says evident, we see a lot of toxicity, for instance, on the internet, especially around political issues, and even recreational things like video games or stories. Things quickly take on a political tone when different communities gather on the internet, and the level quickly escalates in a lot of these communities, say like Twitter. I posted the graffiti that was on the Georgia guidestones. Unfortunately, people in the name of Christ doing something I don't believe that Christ would promote, defacing the guidestones, calling for death to the New World Order. I don't think Christians should be promoting death. Patrick, I understand if you're feeling lost. I get it, and unfortunately, I don't know a good way to back this down to where you are. Tell you what, if you have any questions about what I've said and you want to address them next stream, maybe I can make next stream a specific Q&A stream, assuming that we're going to have people there. I'll keep in mind that that people may have questions as I'm preparing for next stream, and then I can address what it is that that you may be having trouble understanding now, so that we can keep on topic for now. So you see the polarization and how it causes people to call for death. I don't think that's in line with God's values either. Again, God says, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Last week I pulled up the flood story, where after the flood, God said that human life was special above the animals because we are made in his image. And I'm not going to pull that up now because I want to keep talking about this. So I'm seeing on the internet is a good place to find it. Certainly the internet is a reflection of man's hearts. Thank you very much for your comment, Truth for Satan Ministries. The internet is a reflection of man's hearts. And as our society becomes more polarized, I think that impulse to threaten life grows for people who are not submitted to God's values, to honoring mankind in his image. I know one of the things that comes up pretty often, celebrities who take a political view that is not well received often say, I've been receiving death threats. And I'm not in a position to dismiss the truth of statements like that, or to demean such celebrities. If that's the case, assuming that's the case, I think it reflects the attitudes in our society where people are willing to call for death of individuals and not place value on human life. So then that tells me that society is moving in a direction where people are going to be more willing to cause death to people that they consider to be opposed to them. So you say that death is not in line with God's values, which is a question of God's morality. Is God truly perfectly moral? What are your thoughts? I believe that God is the standard, functionally the definition of morality. So if it does not align with who God is, then I would say that it is not moral. Unless, for instance, I can think of the instance that is coming to mind that I do want to use as a caveat is when Jesus was speaking to the Pharisees. Jesus was talking about how God hates divorce, and the Pharisees. I'm not sure if I've got the context exactly right, but the Pharisees were asking Jesus, why then did God allow Moses to write a writ of divorce to send a woman away who was married to her husband. And Jesus said it's because your hearts were hard that God allowed that. That is something that does not align with God's values. I don't know the full reasoning behind why God would make an exception like that. The Bible tells us that God did. So apparently it wasn't so far from who God is that it was immoral for God to allow it, but God says that he hates divorce, and that is what I would... So as I say, God is perfectly moral. I don't want to box God into something he's not. If God is perfectly moral, why does he demand blood sacrifice in the Bible? I think we've addressed this question before in a past stream. I may not be taking the I may not have taken the angle on it back then that you're addressing now. I think I'd like to hold this question for the future stream if we do a Q&A next week. So if you'd like to come back to that, then I'll be less on a particular point, and we'll be able to address that, because that does seem like a big scope question also. That seems like it would be a topic unto itself. Anyway, my point here is I am seeing the attitude of society being one where I do think taking life that people disagree with, you're welcome, Truth for Satan Ministries. I think our society is moving to the point where taking life is less of an issue if that life does not belong to your personal worldview, your personal philosophical tribe. I think people are becoming more okay with that, and I am not okay with that. The Bible says that man is made in God's image. I think regardless of your views, you should be valued as being made in the image of God. I do believe that the Bible says that people who take life, that people who, I believe life can be taken in defense of self and of others. So God, where that comes up is God is trying to avoid harm to life when God allows the taking of life. And other instances would be when people blaspheme God. I think given, if it's a given that, and I believe it is, if it's a given that God is the ultimate standard, the thing that we should be pursuing, then there is harm in stating anything less than that. So I can see why that would be a place for capital punishment also. In general, I see God preserving human life made in his image, and that's the value. Second to God, the value is human life. And that is not the direction I see our society going in. People are willing to harm and mistreat humans who they say are, who they treat as others. And that is something that I try to respond to on this channel. That's why I'm here. That's why I talk to people of varying beliefs. Are you sure that you are not just projecting your personal views and interpretations on the Bible? I think the Bible needs to be understood in context. It's possible that I have my own views and interpretations in my reading of the Bible. If that is the case, we can use the Bible to justify any viewpoint. I would say the more contextual our understanding of the Bible is, the less our own interpretations are going to be able to influence what the Bible means. So for instance, if I'm going to look at, say, Genesis 1:27 and say the word here is his, the word here is he, these words mean something, they're solid, they don't change, then I have to change my mental framework in order to understand this verse the way it is written with his and he. I have to understand in the context of God created man in his image. Okay, that influences my read of the next line. Now we're talking about male and female. He created them. that influences, okay, we're not just talking about him anymore. This them is different. And so that changes the way that I might understand this verse as I am reading it. There may be modern cultural things that I read into this passage, and hopefully as I study the Bible, I become more aware of the culture of the time, but I do believe that the Bible transcends culture also. It doesn't morph to change with modern culture. It stands outside even the human culture that it was written in. God chose the human culture, the Hebrew culture that the Bible was written in, because it was the ideal culture in which to express what he was trying to convey. What is the greater context of Genesis 1:27 in relation to the creation of Eve later on? I think the point of this verse, again, it fully the repeated point, it comes up multiple times in this one verse. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. So this image thing, it's being repeated because it's important. The Bible doesn't want us to miss this. And the male and female, he created them, I believe, is tied in to this idea. So someone, without this line here, male and female, he created them, someone could say, well, man is created in God's image. Woman isn't. I think because this is nearby, because this is in context with this verse, then it's saying women have value also. Now, that is an implication. You might be able to argue that I'm making an assumption. I think looking at the way that the Bible refers to women in the future, I see humans demeaning women. I do not see God demeaning women. Why did God choose an illiterate tribe of desert nomads instead of a developed culture to record his divine message? So, in short, I believe that an illiterate tribe of desert nomads coming up with a book of the quality of the Bible, with 66 volumes, the quality of the Bible, it reveals something about the glory of the God who empowered them to create the book. But if we want to go into deeper detail on that, then I'm going to ask us to wait until next week for anything more on that subject. So, let's see, where am I? I think I made my point about why does the Old Testament state that women can be bought and sold like chattel? Isn't this demeaning to women? Next week. We'll get to that next week. Yeah, if you remember to bring the questions next week. So Patrick, just so you know, I'm assuming that we do have a Q&A next week. I would be surprised if we do gameplay next week also. Okay. You're welcome. So I've made where I am on my point. I see society tending toward the taking of life rather than the valuing of life. So I want to make a big leap in line with the title of the stream and go to the end of the Bible, Revelation, where it talks about how Christians are going to be treated in the period we call the end times. So this is the time when God is finally going to enact justice on the world for our rebellion against him. This is... Okay, Patrick, you take a break if you need to. So God has been merciful for the duration of humanity, but if God was always merciful, there would be no justice. And so there comes a point where God does enforce justice, and that is at what we understand to be the end times, is one of the things we call it, or the last days. Let me go to Revelation 6. This is I'll just go ahead and say my understanding of this period is not the majority Western Christian position. So I'm sure that will raise a bunch of questions also. I'll just kind of give a quick overview. Most Christians believe that basically, well, I'll say here in Revelation 6, it talks about, there are 3 sets of judgments in Revelation. There's the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls. So this is the seals, this is the first set of judgments. And most Christians believe that Jesus will take all Christians off of the surface of the earth in what's called the rapture, take us all to heaven before this event occurs, before these seals begin, before there's any judgment on the earth. And my point of view on that is not in line with the majority position. So I tend to believe we're going to be here for the section that I'm about to read. So we have the first 4 seals. There are these entities that come onto the scene. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse is what they're called. They're popular in fiction and very misrepresented in fiction. Then we get down to the 5th seal. Don't you believe in the rapture? I do believe in the rapture, so I'll go ahead and elaborate on that since that's a question. I don't believe it happens at the beginning of these seal judgments. What I would say, the Bible does teach that Christians do not go through the wrath of God. God is not punishing Christians because we have accepted the salvation provided by Jesus Christ. So this wrath that God is enforcing on the earth is for people who are still in rebellion against God. So I do believe the rapture removes Christians from the earth before that punishment takes place. There is debate in Christianity about when that rapture happens. A lot of people like the idea that Christians aren't involved for any of the difficult and terrible things that the Bible says are going to happen in the final 7 years before God takes over the rule of the earth. Hold on, got distracted. A lot of people that would be the pre-tribulation rapture view, that there's a final period of 7 years. We all agree there's going to be a final period of 7 years, at least the big 3 main views, which I'm not part of any of them, agree there's going to be a final 7 years, and I will add that I do believe that in that 7 years too. So that's the 70th week of Daniel. Daniel is a prophet who says a lot about the end times too. And that's something I think that most people in the Christian community agree on, is that last 7 years. So the pre-tribulation community, the majority in the West, I think, believes that the rapture happens before that 7 years because they believe that whole 7 years is God's wrath. There's also the mid-tribulation group, which I think they say the Antichrist is going to reveal himself at the middle of that period, and that's when the Christians get raptured. And then there's the post-tribulation group that says Christians don't get raptured until the very end. They do get raptured, but they go through the whole 7 years, but they're protected supernaturally by God from any of God's wrath, and that's why Christians don't suffer the wrath of God. So what the name for the position that I believe is pre-wrath, so clearly we believe we're not suffering God's wrath either. We look at Matthew 24 and we compare it to this section, Revelation 6, and it just looks like not exactly the middle of the tribulation, a little bit after the tribulation is when the rapture occurs. So I'm not going to get further into that because that is definitely a tangent worthy of a separate stream, probably within a few weeks. Why does every one of God's solutions involve mass destruction? Justice. I would suggest every single human being has rebelled against God. God's solution also involves mercy through his son. Again, we can hit that next week. So, there are Christians who would say we're not here for any of this. I believe that Christians will be here for this section that I'm about to read, starting in Revelation 6:9. It says, when he opened the fifth seal, this is Jesus opening the fifth seal judgment. Do you believe that God is perfectly just? We've got to define that word perfectly, because I would say that God is perfectly just, but it depends on the definition we're using for the question. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. So these are people who have been on God's side, testifying for God, much like I am. And they've been killed for their commitment to God. And so we recognize, even today, there are many, many people who are being killed for their Christianity. It has happened throughout history ever since Adam and Eve's son Abel. Okay. All right, Patrick, I understand. I may well be here in 30 minutes when you get back. I don't know. So it says, these souls under the altar cried out with a loud voice, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who will dwell on the earth? So there's this group of people who is seeking, who requires justice. They have not received justice for the mistreatment that they have received for being committed to God and to Jesus Christ. And so justice is due for them. Then they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves have been. So this tells me there's a period, the fifth seal, within the last 7 years of Earth's existence. This is a scene that's taking place in heaven. And this verse here tells me at this fifth seal, the persecution of Christians has not stopped. It will continue. During this time, the last 7 years, there is going to be an effort to kill Christians, just like these folks. If God is perfectly just and mass destruction is his solution, why are there so many examples in the Bible of innocent people being punished? Again, this is one of those questions that we're going to have to wait until next week, Truth for Satan Ministry. So I think you understand that. I think you recognize that I'm heading in a certain direction. I'm going to say that I'm going to leave it up to your judgment, whether you want to continue to ask questions that are not along the lines that I'm going to be talking about, knowing that I'm going to say that we're going to address them next week. I'm not going to continue to say we're going to address them next week, because you understand that. So if I see a question I just can't address today, I'm going to ignore it and continue with what I'm saying. So these folks, these Christians who have been killed for their faith, are told there are going to be more who will be killed for their faith, even after this 7-year period has started. So there is actually going to be the active taking of life, and it's going to come from the Christian community. And I did check. I asked Google or DuckDuckGo, whichever search engine I happened to be on at the time, how many Christians there are in the world, and the answer I saw was roughly 2 billion. So that would cut a sizable chunk, if that was possible, that would cut a sizable chunk out of the Earth's population. So let's see these. Okay, good. I'm glad Truth for Satan Ministries. I see your message there. Okay, so let's have a look at how drastic this gets. We'll go to Revelation 11. So we have these two individuals who God has selected to represent him in the last days. So there is I get it, Patrick, and I definitely understand if you decide that you're not going to stay the entire stream. If you do stay the entire stream, then kudos to you, and I certainly appreciate it, but that's certainly up to you also. I'll just keep talking. So there are these two witnesses that God selects to represent him in this time where that's um, filled with, I'm going to say, a satanic attitude of people worshiping Satan and the individual that he has set up. We'll cover the Antichrist in a bit. So there are these two witnesses that God establishes to speak of him and to represent him during this time of persecution of God's people, and God gives them a supernatural protection. They can offensively harm those who are trying to harm them. That they can defend themselves from people. They can cause famine. They can turn water to blood. So I can well imagine that society is not going to be on the side of these folks. They're going to see these folks as a harm and as enemies. And then when they have finished their testimony, the beast, that would be the Antichrist, that rises from the bottomless pit, will make war on them and conquer them and kill them. And their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city that is symbolically is called Sodom and Egypt, where the Lord was crucified. So we understand Jesus was crucified in Jerusalem. So symbolically, Sodom and Egypt, actually Jerusalem, is where these people will be left for dead after being executed. For 3.5 days, some of the peoples and tribes and languages and nations will gaze at their dead bodies and refuse to let them be placed in a tomb. I want to check this. Again, this may be a difference in translation, because I think that most of the versions tend to be a little bit more broad about this. And they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put into graves. Then those from will see. Okay, so I'm not seeing a qualification in the King James, New King James, the way I'm seeing in the ESV, that one. The NASB, those from the peoples, tribes, languages, and nations will look at their dead bodies for 3.5 days. So this is where I like to have access to multiple versions of the Bible, and try to see where there's the most agreement, because I have found in different versions, I look at them and I go, that one seems a little modernized, or that one doesn't seem like what I've seen in other versions, or and I'm not sure that the King James Version, that's the one that we have had for a long time, it's held to be the standard. I do believe it's a good standard. I also do believe that we may understand more about language or about how the Bible was copied over time today than they may have in 1611. So I am certainly at risk of reading my own interpretation in to the versions that I'm choosing. That's why I'm trying to choose the versions that tend to have the most agreement, not to choose the versions that I like better, to tend to choose the versions that are the most aligned across time and translation. So looking at this, the versions that tend to agree don't qualify some. They say, and they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put into graves. And at the time that John was writing this, some would have made sense, because John the Apostle was living in the time of the Romans. You had to be present in order to see these corpses. Now we live in an era where we have television, and more importantly, internet, and more importantly, smartphones. And I do believe that it is certainly possible now in a way that it was not possible at the writing of the Bible here, for the entire world to be aware of these dead witnesses. And interestingly, the nations will gaze at their dead bodies. It's like there's a live stream of these corpses decaying, and refuse to let them be placed in a tomb. And certainly in 3.5 days, you do see the effects of decay on a corpses. So the people of the world are willingly watching these two witnesses rot. And those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and make merry. And I think those who dwell on the earth, I'm just going to check. Those who dwell on the earth, those who live on the earth, that is a broad statement there. So those who dwell on the earth, that's not just those who dwell in Jerusalem. That's those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and make merry and exchange presents. In the span of 3.5 days, news has gotten worldwide, and people are already buying and exchanging gifts because these two prophets had been a torment to those who dwell on the earth. So this is something I do not think was possible in the time that John wrote the Bible, and that gives credence to the idea he has a supernatural vision of what is going on at the end times, that this represents the truth of what will be occurring in the end times. So we've got people have become so callous. Okay, great. Patrick, we'll see how long your brain lasts this time. So by this point, people have become so callous, and I understand you've got these witnesses who have made life difficult. They are not the only things making life difficult. God is in judgment on the earth. If people were listening to these witnesses, they would know how to be redeemed and rescued from the judgment that is currently happening. But people have grown so callous that they refuse to hide the bodies away. They are willing to spend their time watching the rot of these two witnesses. And Revelation 11:11 says, "But after 3.5 days, a breath of life from God entered them, and they stood up on their feet, and great fear fell on those who saw them," no doubt. Then they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, "Come up here," and they went up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies watched them. So that will be the outcome of those two witnesses. But I want to point out that is the attitude that is going to be in society at the last days. They will not care if people die. There will be no stigma to death in this period. Let's move on to who's in charge. I'll just jump forward a couple passages, because this is what I'm aiming for. This is where I'm heading for. I mentioned that there's going to be persecutions of Christians. This is the one who is going to be doing the persecuting. The Antichrist is the name we have for him from, I don't know if it's in this section of the Bible in Revelation or if it's in a different section, but also we call him the beast. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads and 10 diadems, crowns on its horns, blasphemous names on its heads. I'm going to skip through a bunch of this. Why do wars happen? It's like it's pretty much killing your species slowly or quickly. We can bring that up next week if we have time for that with all the questions I'm expecting. So I'm going to skip past this to where I want to focus on. Let me see where I'll go ahead and go here. People are impressed by this beast. They're following, they're worshiping, and they worship the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. So the dragon is another name for Satan. We have satanic worship here. He has given his authority to the beast. And they worship the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" The beast reigns for 42 months. And let's see. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. So some manuscripts omit this sentence. That's one good thing about the modern versions of the Bible, is we have some context for the past. I think the people translating the Bible do their best to be as careful as possible. So if some manuscripts have this sentence, they'll put it in here, and then they'll put a footnote saying some manuscripts omit it. And authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all who dwell on the earth will worship it. So this dragon is making war on the earth, on the saints, on those who are committed to God. Like I mentioned with the fifth seal, this Antichrist is the one doing the persecuting of the saints. All who dwell on the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. So there's some context there I'm going to breeze over. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword, he must be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. So it's letting us know, those of us who may go through this time, that this is a actual risk. There's no escaping this, from my understanding of this, from this verse. This verse is actually encouraging to me, because you have Christians who ask, well, what do we do about this? Should we be preppers? Should we hide? Should we get off the grid? Are we even supposed to be, how do we share the gospel? Because that's important, but should we not be during this time? And this verse tells us, listen, don't worry about it. God's in charge. There's nothing you're going to be able to do about this. If you're going to go into captivity, be faithful. So we'll go a little further. There's another beast who we call the false prophet. It exercises all the authority of the first beast, makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast. It performs supernatural signs. So I would distinguish between these signs and the ones of the witnesses. I think God does allow Satan to give power to these beasts during this time. Any power Satan has been allowed him by God. And that is because God is giving him the freedom, just as God gives us the freedom to rebel against God, to show the kind of people that we actually are. God has allowed Satan this also, and Satan is using it to definitely blaspheme and mislead, as I understand it. So this false prophet is causing people to worship the beast who worships the dragon. And let's see, where am I going? Also, the second beast, the false prophet. No. The beast, the Antichrist, the false prophet, are able to give life to an image of the beast. I don't know if this is like a TV image, or if this is some animatronic, or even a supernaturally living image of some sort. Don't understand the meaning of what this is. I'm sure we'll find out in the future. But this image is causing all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let everyone who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man, and his number is 666. Welcome back, Truth for Satan Ministries. I missed that you were saying that you were heading out, so I understand if you don't have a lot of time next, but welcome back. So, Patrick, you've been saying that you have trouble grasping all of this stuff, and I'll go ahead and point out this is a section that I don't think any Christian understands. No Christian has the wisdom to grasp this final verse identifying this mark of the beast. We're still trying to figure this out. And even this book Revelation is a very difficult verse for Christians. That's why we've got some debate about, say, when the rapture is. There's a lot of context here also that I'm skipping over. I can't fill in and keep the stream within a reasonable period of time. What I'm pointing at here, there's this mark that the Bible says is going to be instituted. And it is going to be impossible to buy or sell without this mark. And that mark is going to be mandatory for everyone. So, as a Christian, I am aware of fellow Christians who look at the vaccinations that are happening for COVID. And they're saying, oh, the governments are starting to get kind of heavy-handed about those vaccinations. The government is starting to insist that everybody has these vaccinations, and there's rumors about what's in the vaccinations. Could these vaccinations be the mark of the beast? Do we have a moral, biblical mandate against getting these vaccinations? So what I'm seeing here, this mark of the beast that everyone's worried about, wondering if the vaccinations are, it says no one can buy or sell. Some biblical scholars say that 666 was code for the Emperor Nero. I would not be surprised that some biblical scholars say that. I don't know that to be 100% true, so I am not going to attach to that position. But I think there are some biblical scholars, some people who take on the name Christian, and I'm not going to say whether they are truly Christian or not, but I think this belief that I'm about to describe is so different that I would want to have a look at it before I make a determination that they are. There are some people who believe in what's called amillennialism, which is that the millennium, which is described at the end of Revelation, the kingdom that God is going to establish, is basically already established. I'm not well familiar with all the particulars of that viewpoint. I would suggest that there is enough information in the Bible to argue against that viewpoint. But I could see people like that, people who don't believe that there is coming a time of judgment, saying, oh no, 666 is not about the future, it's about Nero. I've heard that there are, I can look into that and become better informed. I probably wouldn't be informed enough to address any questions about that next week, so let me know if you'd like to talk more about that in the future. But from what I understand, I would take the Bible in context to suggest that there is a time of judgment still coming, and that this number is not necessarily Nero. It is attached to the name of the beast, and it has something to do with the number of man who happened to be created on the sixth day. What are your thoughts about the Antichrist? That is a very broad question. So I've read a bit about him so far. I've skipped over a lot of him. From what I understand, he is in opposition against God, uttering blasphemies against God. Could possibly set himself up, probably sets himself up as the deliverer, which is why everyone would be worshiping him, because they're at a point where they are looking for deliverance, say, from God's judgment. They're looking for someone to rescue them from all the unpleasantness of what they're undergoing at that time. So that's in brief. Certainly he is no friend to Christians, because he is making war on the saints, on the Christians who are alive at the time. And let me go ahead and move forward about this mark, because I think that has something to say about his persona also. Revelation 4, we're going to move past the irrelevant sections. There's these angels that entered the scene during the middle of the prophecy of Revelation, which is too big for me to give full context on. The one we're interested in is this third angel. He says, if anyone worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on his forehead or his hand, he also will drink the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. So this is a not at all vague, a very graphic way. Well, let me continue with the graphicness. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, these worshippers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of its name. So a very graphic explanation that whoever takes this mark of the beast is not under the protection of Jesus Christ, is not saved from their sins, is considered a rebel against God, and receives the full punishment that rebels are going to receive as a result of God's justice. And then we hear that verse again that was before. Here's a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. So this section is to encourage any Christians who are alive at that time. Do not, under any circumstances, doesn't matter if you can't buy or sell, do not get the mark of the beast, because then you are not a Christian. You are not under the righteousness of Jesus anymore. Would you say that those who accept the mark of the beast are eternally damned? I would. Yeah. So, based on what I'm seeing here just in these verses, I think it's pretty clear. So when I'm hearing the questions, is the COVID vaccine the mark of the beast? It's going to be mandatory. We're not going to be able to go into stores unless we have this vaccination. Should we resist because we don't want to lose our salvation? I would say no. This is where I say I don't believe this is the mark of the beast. One other thing, let me go back a bit. So for one thing, I believe that God is going to make it very evident to Christians when they're about to make a decision that is going to cost them their salvation. In the book of John, I'm not going to head there because it would take too long. Why does God eternally damn people instead of rehabilitating them? What has these thousands of years been, if not the opportunity to rehabilitate? So the Bible does say in, I don't remember if it's Peter, some of the later verses, like Peter, like Jude, I think. 1st and 2nd Peter, I'm not sure which of those books it's in. But it does describe that God is currently being merciful to us to give us an opportunity to repent. So that is where that comes from, is this period of time where we are acting in opposition to God is an opportunity for us to repent and to submit to God. So this is our rehabilitation. And if we do not submit during this period of time, then we are subject to God's judgment. In John, there's a place, I'm not going to go to it now, but Jesus says that no one can take those who belong to him from his hand. No one can take us from the Father's hand. So I think that God is invested enough in the salvation of those who have accepted Christ as their Savior. He's going to make sure they know this is a decision that is going to mark you, literally, as for me or for the devil. Why doesn't God rehabilitate people in the afterlife? We can get to that subject next week. I think that may get into a topic that gets to be too big for now. I could make a brief answer to the previous question, but I won't go any further for now. So the vaccine, I do not believe is a distinguishing enough decision. People are asking questions. Is this the mark of the beast? And I would ask, what does taking a vaccine have to do with our salvation? Because a lot of people are vaccinated already. Would you say that some are predestined to be saved like what Calvinists do? That's another question for next week. So I'll go ahead and leave that for my answer for most of the questions, unless they're on topic here and I feel like I can answer them while I'm dealing with this subject. The vaccine, I've been vaccinated, not for COVID yet. I'm waiting for a vaccine that I feel like I can trust. I kind of feel like this one has been rushed and is a test run, and I am certainly open to any information about confirming the safety of the vaccines that are available now. My personal decision now is not to leap for the vaccine, but it's not for religious reasons. I've had other vaccines. I still consider myself to be a Christian. I am trusting in Jesus' righteousness and in the salvation that he provides. I have no doubt that I am going to heaven based on what the Bible teaches about Christianity and eternity. I do not believe that that there is enough of a distinction about the COVID vaccines to indicate that these are the mark of the beast, especially since Revelation 3:13-16 says that they're going to be marked, get out of the way footnote, okay, on the right hand or on the forehead. What happens if your beliefs about the vaccine are wrong, and it turns out that it was the mark of the beast? Will you lose your salvation? That gets into questions about God's character. My belief about God's character is that he has such a character. He is of such character that he is not going to allow his people to be lost. Just like in John says, he's not going to allow his people to be lost. I recognize that you and I have disagreements about God's character. So if we get into a discussion on that, I'm not sure that it's going to come to any finishing point. Because of my beliefs on God's character, I would say that I am probably not wrong. I'm going to say probably. I'm not going to say I have definitive knowledge there. I am trusting that God is invested enough in his children to protect us just as God said he would. So since God is not a liar, since God is sovereign and is good, I am not in any doubt about the nature of my salvation for, say, having a tetanus vaccine or whatever other vaccines I was given when I was born. So the requirements for salvation in the majority of the New Testament, which is where we start to get those requirements out of Jesus' mouth and out of the mouths of the apostles, are to believe in Jesus, to rely on Jesus for salvation from our sins. We have this indication that there's a mark that will once and for all mark your reliance on Jesus or not on Jesus. Should you be giving advice if you don't know for certain that the vaccine could be the mark of the beast? My perspective about what I'm doing on this channel. I mentioned it before in past streams, but I'm not sure that I've mentioned it recently, so it's a good time to bring it up. I do not consider myself to be teaching on this channel. I do consider myself to be informing, and what I am informing, what if people lose their salvation because they believed what you said? So what I am informing of is my beliefs, recognizing that they are affected by my interpretation of the Bible, and I give my reasons for why I interpret it the way I do. I explain how I'm trying to mitigate it being my interpretation, but that is what I am informing you of, is what I believe based on this book that I am committed to. And so the distinction I am making is when I speak, I am not expecting someone to walk away and do something with what I say. Now you can. It's possible that people do walk away based on what I say and make a decision that I would not agree with. I know these are hard questions. Thanks for being patient and explaining. Thank you for asking them. Certainly if they're relevant to the topic, and I think it's valid to ask in what the nature of my comments are. If I'm saying anything that seems to be factual, I think that's fair to address this here. I don't mind answering the hard questions. They're questions I need to know the answers to. Certainly I do want to stay on topic, but I think part of the topic is to say, okay, where am I coming from as I'm discussing this? So I don't expect people to take what I say and embody it themselves. And I'm stand to continue on for quite a while, Patrick. So if you need to call it a night, then I certainly understand. If you want to stay, then you are certainly welcome to. The distinction I'm making between informing and teaching, if you're a teacher in a classroom, you're going to hold a test. You're going to expect your students to retain the information at least as long as the test. That's not what I'm doing here. I am giving you information. You can decide whether you want to take it, leave it, remember it, forget it. It could be that someone decides to take something I say out of context. They could jump in for 5 seconds, hear me say, I don't think the vaccine is the mark of the beast. Take the vaccine, oops, it was the mark of the beast, regardless of my beliefs. That's possible. If they take what I say in context, then they're going to hear me talking about my interpretation, which I say throughout my streams could be flawed. They're going to see me pointing back to the Bible and saying we want to focus on the Bible, not only on what we'd prefer the Bible to say. So we want to keep the Bible in context. We want to be conforming our mind to this. And of course, I say that as a Christian. So I understand if not everyone holds that belief. But if you care about my beliefs, you care about the fact that I am doing my best with the imperfection that I have to align myself to this source of knowledge that God has given us, not to go conform it to myself. Will God hold you accountable if they lose their salvation because of you? God knows my heart, and God knows their hearts. So I do not know that for every situation I can speak to my accountability versus their accountability. I do believe they will be accountable for searching for the information themselves. If someone hears me in 5 seconds say, you should be a Christian, and they say, I should be a Christian, and they commit themselves to Christianity, based on you should be a Christian, I don't think they'll be a Christian, because they are not hearing about Jesus Christ. They are not hearing about how they're saved from their sins. And if they do hear me say, get saved from their sins, I do think they have a responsibility to determine. You do have a responsibility, anybody who's watching or listening, to determine for yourself whether or not that is true. From what I understand, this is a serious subject. Earlier you stated that people will be eternally damned if they accept the mark. Okay, so I'll continue talking, and I know it sounds like you've got more to fill in here, so I'll hold this half of your statement in mind to keep it in mind for the next for when the next part comes up. And I've got to get back on where I was again. So I think each person is responsible for knowing for themselves the truth of what they're believing, what I'm saying. Okay. I think God will hold a person responsible for not determining that. For instance, there was a gal once who came to my Sunday school and was asking questions about Christianity and decided to become a Christian, but she became a Christian with an attitude of trying it on. So when it didn't do what she wanted it to do, she was not, we had told her, no, your expectations of Christianity are flawed. Then she decided, okay, it's not for me, and did not follow through with it. So I don't think that she automatically gets into heaven just because she tried it for a little while. I think God is going to hold her accountable for choosing not to, for not having done enough of the legwork the first time to be fully committed to Christianity. Now, there are children who become Christians. They don't have the same level of philosophical maturity that adults do. So where that line is, how much legwork you do, is I can't speak to directly. I do know that in one of the final 3 books of John, there's like 3, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John. John, in one of those apostles, does say if they were with us, they would not have left us. So that is, I think, a distinction. That is a way that we understand whether they have done the legwork, I would say, of understanding what it is that they're saying that they're believing. So, if you're going to listen to me, I would suggest you read the Bible too. Get fully informed. Make sure that this is a decision you are making. Don't play with it. This is serious. Why do you say that the vaccines are not the mark of the beast? So, I think to boil it down, the vaccine, I do not understand the vaccine, for one thing, to be implemented in the right hand or the forehead. That seems strangely specific in the Bible, that the mark is to be marked on the right hand or the forehead. Not the left hand? Just the right hand? Apparently so. So the vaccine doesn't match that level of specificity. And also, I think it's going to be clear, based on God's character, that the vaccine, I think the vaccine is not a point of clarity regarding salvation. I think people who are in Christ, who are reading their Bibles, who are committed to God, are going to know whether something is going to influence their salvation. God is going to make it clear to them so that no one is making a decision that is going to lose them their salvation. So that's the 2 points that I'm looking at. Plus, I don't know that the vaccine has any relevance to the number 666. That may be a factor that helps us to identify, oh, this is a salvation thing. There are people who are saying that, oh, the agreements that have been made, I've seen like this bill that came out for it or something. Oh, interesting. Footnote, some manuscript 616. I have no idea. Most of them say 666. That reminds me of some situations in parables where the counting is different than how we would do. So I understand why there would be a difference there. I'm not going to get too deep into that. But anyway, I do think that it's going to be clear. It's not going to be something that you can miss out of ignorance. Every Christian is going to get into heaven. Everyone who is under the salvation of Jesus Christ, God is not going to lose any of them. So I don't think that there's going to be the risk of someone who is actually saved by Jesus Christ getting this mark of the beast. They may be tempted, and then this the warning that we see in chapter 14 is an encouragement not to give in to that temptation. Okay, so let me get to my notes, see where I am, because let me go ahead and get to chapter 20. This will also relate to what we're, just bumped my mic, I apologize. This will also get to what we've been talking about the fate of those who do take the mark of the beast. So this is also very clear, very descriptive. So 20, verse 4 through 5, here we are. So this is at the very end of the 7 years. The millennial kingdom is about to be established. It says, then I saw thrones, and seated on them were those to whom authority to judge was committed. Don't know who those would be at this point. People who, souls who belong to Jesus, whatever the nature of those souls are, be they angelic or human, I don't know. Also, I saw the souls of those who have been beheaded for the testimony of Jesus and for the word of God. So that's those souls under the altar. Finally, they're about to get their justice. And those, oh, okay, so no, this is all of the saved. So those souls who had been beheaded, those who had not worshipped the beast or his image and had not received his mark on their foreheads or their hands. So these are standing before these thrones. They came to life and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. So the verdict for them is they get to be in the millennial kingdom for this 1,000 years. The rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. So these get to be part of the millennial kingdom. The rest of the dead are those who did worship the beast, did worship its image, did receive its mark. So they are not part of the 1,000-year kingdom. Then later on, we're skipping over the judgment of Satan here. Now we're getting to the judgment of the souls after the millennial kingdom. Then I saw a great white throne with him who was seated on it. So this, I believe, would be Jesus. This is one person, not those who have been given authority to judge. From his presence, earth and sky fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Then another book was opened, which was the book of life. And if you, there is tradition in the Jewish religion also about this book of life, relating to the resurrection. So there's a kind of callback there it's related to the Jewish faith also. And the dead were judged by what was written in the books according to what they had done. So these are the ones who were left until the 1,000 years were ended. The 1,000 years were ended. Now we're dealing with those other souls. And the sea gave up the dead that were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and they were judged, each one of them according to what they had done. So for us Christians, we recognize we can't withstand judgment based on what we've done. We have all done evil against God. We have rebelled against God. We would not sustain that judgment, but thankfully Jesus paid that punishment, that penalty for us. And we are basically robed in his righteousness for this judgment. We are judged according to what he has done. And so we are not punished the way these are. And death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. So that's those who have taken the mark of the beast. This is like the third chapter from the end of the Bible. It's Revelation 20, Revelation 21, Revelation 22, I think. Is it 22 or 21? Yeah, 22. So this is basically the period on the statement about those who have not given their lives to Christ, have not submitted themselves to God by this point. Okay, so in order for the mark of the beast to exist, what am I expecting as I'm questioning what will the mark of the beast look like? I think clearly we're close because people are starting to wonder. Now, people have been wondering for a long time about the mark of the beast. My parents were overseas for a long time, and then they came to the United States when they were younger, I think shortly after I was born. And when they came to the United States, barcodes were being implemented. And it was a new thing. You just slide your products over the scanner, and all of a sudden the person knows what the price is without having to check each item and type it into the computer. And as I was growing up, there was a video series about what life might be like in the end times for people who did not get raptured, people maybe who decided after the rapture to submit to Christ and were going through the end times. There was a video series about that. And in that video series, a number of other Christian video series about the end times, they showed the mark of the beast as a barcode on the hand. So that was what was speculated a while back. Barcodes so far have not been the undoing of us. We are progressing now to a time where we're considering computer chips. And for a long time, people have been considering computer chips. I remember hearing about a man who got a chip in his elbow. I think it was the elbow, and he was able to walk into his office and have doors open for him without, they were not the automatic sliding doors we're familiar with. They knew where he was because of the chip, and the lights would come on in the room that he walked into because of the chip in his elbow. And so that has been a point of discussion lately. And so that it's interesting to me that we have been moving to this period, especially economically, because the mark of the beast is going to affect whether people can buy or sell. In John's time, when he was writing the book here, people were exchanging goods and coins, denarii, was the currency of the time. That was the way they were doing economy. So you wouldn't be able to hinder people from making an economical trade. What if the mark of the beast never comes? Jesus is already 2,000 years late. I'm curious by what standard you are saying late. In one of the Peters, I don't remember which, first or second Peter, but it does say that there are people who will say that Jesus is coming late, that things continue as they have been. Again, this is a period of mercy that God is giving us to have time to turn and submit to Him. Based on what I read in the Bible, trusting that the Bible is true, based on the evidence that I have for God's existence and who God must be, and I've mentioned that evidence in other streams on this channel, and can certainly mention them in the future, though not today because I want to stay on topic. I do believe the mark of the beast will come. If the mark of the beast never comes, then this verse is false, and that invalidates the Bible. That invalidates God's character. I don't think that's going to happen. So, if Jesus hasn't come in 2,000 years, will He ever come? Maybe He changed His mind. These questions are in contradiction to what the Bible says. So, given my belief in the Bible, and again based on other reasons I have for believing the Bible is true, I don't find a lot of value in the questions. You have to be able to prove to me that the Bible is untrue first. Just because Jesus hasn't come in 2,000 years doesn't mean He won't come. We've got to find another tack in order to prove that He won't ever come, in order to prove that the Bible is not true. So I don't see a lot of very far that we can go along that line of discussion. Okay, let me get my thoughts back on train again. So yes, when John was writing the book of Revelation, they were exchanging goods and money in order to make trade. That was the way to do it for thousands of years after John finished. And then I think more recently, I don't remember, I mean, obviously I don't remember, this was before my time, but I don't know exactly when this started to happen, but paper money became more prevalent, and the value of that paper money was based on how much gold the nation had. And as I understand it, there came a point where the nations decided, or at least the United States decided, not to be attached to their gold standard for the value of their money now. Now we're on what I understand is called a fiat standard. Basically, how valuable do you believe the United States is? And I've got a very simplified understanding of this. I would have to do some study on economics in order to completely be able to express this. Most of my understanding comes from a YouTube channel called Extra Credit, which did some history videos, and some of their videos had to do with the history of paper money, I think. So you can go back to that if you want to see where I'm getting all that from, and whether my understanding or their presentation of it is limited. But I think it's interesting, with a fiat standard now, the government is kind of free to change the value of things. And we see them playing with inflation all the time about how much money is available to be exchanged. How much money is being printed influences how much we're able to buy with that money. Again, a field that is beyond my expertise. But we're also in a position where our money is no longer exchanging hands in paper form. Our money is now credited us through the banking system, where we may write a check to the bank to deposit the value of that valueless piece of paper in the bank. The bank makes arrangements through the banking system to be credited the value, which they're going to use to then make loans and things to benefit their side. And then we are assuming we have that credit in our bank account. So that allows us then to make transactions, say, with debit cards or credit cards, to make transactions that are detached from physicality. We don't exchange physical money anymore. And now we have these institutions, such as the bank, such as the government can influence the banking system. People get their assets frozen for being enemies of the state. Those people are no longer able to use their assets in that banking system to make trade. And so I can see a potential future where we have the technology where government can be aware of everyone's transactions digitally and can influence the value of those transactions on an individual basis. If the government is aware, say, that I'm a Christian, that I don't have the mark of the beast, are they going to limit the exchange from my credit card to an organization? That value is zero. That's assuming we're still using credit cards. Maybe I don't even have access to currency if I haven't implemented the mark of the beast. So we're moving in an economical direction that makes this more possible than less. It was impossible at the time that John the Apostle was writing the book of Revelation. Now we're moving in a direction that makes it more possible. Okay. In order to have this mark of the beast implemented, we need a society that's going to be okay with becoming transhuman, with being merged with cybernetics. We've had some influence in our fiction, in our stories, movies, computer games. I think society has been familiar with this concept of augmenting ourselves with, and I'm working from the assumption that maybe the mark is a chip. Maybe it's not. I don't have any idea what the future is going to look like. Maybe it's something even more advanced or even less advanced. I think a chip is very possible given the economic situation we're in. So we're seeing also in addition to the cybernetic possibility, if we remove the transhumanism, we're also going through a stage now with the coronavirus where I believe we're being conditioned. I don't know if it's on purpose on the human side or if it's more of a spiritual conditioning where we are becoming willing to have mandated to us what is done to our bodies. In order to have the convenience of going where we want to go, doing what we want to do, then we're willing to accept a vaccine. Some of us more willing than others. But I think we're moving in that direction. Once the vaccine gets fully implemented, then we will be a step further in that direction. That to me is not an argument not to get the vaccine. You would want to determine for yourself whether you think that's right for you. I think it's good advice. Check with your doctor, check with people who are knowledgeable regarding your own philosophical beliefs. I think Truth for Satan Ministries does have a point in that you want to know, based on the Bible, if you have any spiritual concerns about the vaccine, be aware of what the Bible says and make sure that you're in line with the Bible's teaching on the matter. Don't just take my word for it. I do think that once we've gotten through this period, we'll have a society that is more amenable to having things mandated to us. We'll be more complicit in for the sake of convenience, not just of vaccines, but of other government mandates. Anyway, that is the end of my note cards. That is about where I wanted to go with the subject. So we went from Genesis 1:1, not 1:1, but Genesis 1. Let me get back there. Would be nice if I told it what book of the Bible I want. Went from Genesis 1 to God made man in his image. We're moving to a time when society is no longer seeing human life as valuable. Instead of having dominion over the environment, which I do believe that means we should be good stewards of the environment for God's sake. We're coming to a point where we're letting the environment have dominion over us. We're thinking about diminishing the population in order to make room for nature, to leave room for nature. So, and then God tells us to be fruitful and multiply. And again, our society is in opposition to that precept, because we don't, as a society, secular society, doesn't believe that God is in charge or is exercising his care of us, is not trusting him to manage our resources. I think it's leading to a point where people will certainly rejoice over the deaths of the witnesses, specifically that the Bible mentions in Revelation 11, and Christians in general. And that is part of my concern. That is part of why I established this channel. I'm seeing polarization in our society. People calling for death threats to people they don't like. What's the solution to that? The solution is being able to have a conversation, and that's why I appreciate Patrick and Truth for Satan Ministries and anyone else who comes to watch or chat, especially anyone who leaves comments or chats. I appreciate the opportunity to compare and contrast beliefs without jumping down each other's throats, without being vicious. And whether or not you decide to become a Christian, I think there's value in us understanding what each other believes. I think there's value in working out how do we share this world together, work together for the longevity of the human race on the world. I think we do have a ticking clock. God will call a stop to it at some point. If the Bible is for some reason not true, I am not giving credence to that, but I am, for the sake of argument, allowing for it. If the Bible is not true, then the alternative is that we are trying to last as long as we can until the heat death of the universe. And that seems like a utterly hopeless pursuit to me, hopeless and meaningless. Given what the Bible tells me, God has a better plan than that for those who are submitted to him, have accepted his plan for salvation, and I look forward to that. And I think I'm done. So, looking forward to next week. I expect to have a lot of questions to field, and I hope I do them justice. I will go ahead and say I am not fully informed. I do reserve the right to say I don't know. As you know, I have admitted to my possible errancy even during this stream. So I'll call it quits today. God bless you, and play kind.